You're standing in your kitchen. It's a totally normal Tuesday. Coffee's brewing, phone's charging, everything's fine. And then out of nowhere, your roommate drops a pan on the tile floor behind you. Here's the thing. Before you even register the sound as a pan, before your brain has processed anything resembling the thought, "Oh, that was loud," your shoulders have already jumped, your eyes have already slammed shut, your hands are already up near your face like you're about to block a punch, and you didn't decide to do any of that. It just happened to you, without you. By the time your conscious mind catches up and goes, "Oh, okay, it's just a pan," your body has already finished its entire emergency response and is standing down. You reacted to something before you knew what it was, which, if you actually sit with that for a second, is kind of insane. How do you respond to a threat you haven't even identified yet? And that question, how your body can act faster than your own awareness of the event that caused it, goes a lot deeper than it's just a reflex. Once you understand what's actually happening in that quarter of a second, you're going to start noticing it everywhere, in yourself and in other people, and you're never going to experience a jump scare, a car horn, or an unexpected tap on the shoulder quite the same way again. Let's talk about the flinch, the bouncer, not the manager. So here's the first thing most people get wrong. We tend to assume our brain works like one unified command center. Information comes in, gets thought about, decision gets made, body responds, neat little chain of command. But that's not how it works when speed actually matters. When speed matters, your brain skips the manager entirely and goes straight to the bouncer. That bouncer is a structure deep in your brain called the amygdala, and specifically there's a shortcut into it that researchers sometimes call the low road. The term comes from the work of Joseph Ledoux, a neuroscientist at NYU who spent decades mapping fear circuitry in the brain. Ledoux's research, going back to studies published in the early 1990s and expanded through the 2000s, showed that sensory information, a loud bang, a shape moving fast toward your face, can travel from your eyes or ears straight to the amygdala without ever passing through the parts of your brain responsible for conscious recognition. Normally, we think seeing happens, then understanding happens, then reacting happens. Ledoux's low road cuts that whole sequence in half. The raw signal, vague, blurry, unprocessed, goes to the amygdala first. The amygdala doesn't know it's a pan. It doesn't know it's your roommate. It just knows fast movement, loud noise, possible danger, react now, ask questions later. The high road, the slower path that actually identifies what the object is still en route to your visual cortex while your shoulders are already halfway to your ears. This is why you can flinch at a shadow, a rubber snake, a friend jumping out to say boo, even a picture of a spider on a screen isn't real. The bouncer doesn't wait for the manager's approval. The bouncer's entire job is to overreact, just in case. Because a bouncer who's too relaxed doesn't survive very long in an evolutionary sense, and neither historically would you. The 40-millisecond problem. Now here's where it gets genuinely wild, because we can actually put a number on how much of a head start your reflex gets over your awareness. There's a classic startle reflex measured by researchers using something called electromyography, which basically tracks the electrical activity of your muscles. Studies out of labs like the one run by Peter Lang at the University of Florida. Lang's work on the startle reflex has been foundational in this field since the 1990s, have clocked the human eye blink startle response at somewhere around 30 to 50 milliseconds after a sudden loud noise. For comparison, it takes your brain something like 200 to 300 milliseconds just to consciously register that a sound happened at all, let alone identify what it was. Sit with that gap. Your body has already flinched, already begun protecting your eyes and vital areas, 6 to 10 times faster than your conscious mind even knows something occurred. You are quite literally the last one to find out about your own reaction. Some of you are nodding along right now because you've absolutely had the experience of jumping at something, and then half a second later, feeling almost embarrassed, like your body did something behind your back without consulting you. Because it did. This is also, by the way, why don't flinch is genuinely terrible advice, and why telling someone not to blink when air is puffed at their eye almost never works. That's actually a classic paradigm researchers use, the air puff eye blink test, precisely because it's so resistant to conscious override. Volunteers know it's coming. They know it's harmless. They still blink. The reflex arc for this doesn't run through the part of the brain that takes instructions. It runs through the brainstem and spinal cord, which are frankly not interested in your opinion, why your whole body gets involved, not just your eyes. Here's a detail that a lot of people don't know. The startle response isn't just an eye thing, it's a full-body event, and it follows an extremely predictable pattern across basically every human being on Earth, regardless of culture, age, or background. Researcher Ronald Simons, who studied startle patterns extensively, documented what's sometimes called the universal startle pattern: eyes clamp shut, head and neck flex forward. Shoulders hunch up toward the ears, arms bend inward, knees may buckle slightly, and the torso curls. Watch a slow-motion video of literally anyone getting startled. A toddler, a soldier, a grandmother, doesn't matter. And you'll see some version of this same crumpled, protective posture. It's the same shape the human body has probably been making for hundreds of thousands of years because it's the shape that best protects your eyes, throat, and internal organs from an incoming strike. Which means when you flinch at a dropped pan, you're not having some weirdly personal, embarrassing overreaction. You're performing a piece of full-body choreography that's basically hardwired into every human nervous system, optimized over an absurdly long timescale for a world with a lot more actual physical ambushes than kitchens with dropped cookware. Your body doesn't know the difference between loud noise from a falling pan and loud noise from a collapsing rock during an ambush. To the bouncer, loud and sudden is loud and sudden. And it's not only sound, fast-looming visual stimuli. Something that appears to be rapidly growing in your field of vision, like an object flying at your face, triggers the exact same defensive posture. Researchers studying what's called looming stimuli, including work published through outlets like the Journal of Experimental Psychology, have shown that this defensive flinch response to an approaching object is present even in newborns and in several other primate species, which is a strong clue that we are looking at something extremely old in evolutionary terms, not something you personally learned to do. So by this point, you might be thinking, okay, that's a cool piece of trivia. My body has an ancient defense reflex. Neat. But this is actually where the story gets a lot more interesting and a lot more relevant to your day-to-day life than loud pan jumpy person. Because the same circuit that makes you flinch at a dropped pan is also quietly running in the background of way more situations than you'd expect. And it's shaping things about your personality, your relationships, and even your health that you've probably never connected back to this. The baseline problem. So let's talk about that background hum. Because this is where the flinch stops being a cute reflex fact and starts explaining actual patterns in your life. Your amygdala doesn't reset to 0 after every startle. It operates off something researchers call a baseline arousal level, and that baseline is different for every single person, and it's shaped by everything from your genetics to your sleep last night to whether you grew up in a chaotic household or a calm one. A 2006 study out of Emory University, led by researcher Seth Norholm, looked at something called fear-potentiated startle. Basically, how much bigger your flinch gets when you're already primed to expect something bad. What they found is that people with elevated baseline anxiety, or people with a history of trauma, show a dramatically exaggerated startle response. Not just a slightly bigger jump, a measurably, physiologically bigger one, sometimes 2 to 3 times the muscle response of someone with a calmer nervous system. This is part of why exaggerated startle response is actually a diagnostic criterion. Clinicians look for with PTSD. It's not a metaphor when someone says a war veteran jumps at loud noises. Their bouncer has been recalibrated by real danger to treat almost everything as a potential threat. And that recalibration doesn't just go away because the danger is over. The nervous system doesn't automatically know the war ended. It's still running the old settings. And here's the part that applies to basically everyone watching this. Not just people with clinical trauma histories. Your baseline gets nudged around by ordinary stress too. Bad night of sleep, high-stress week at work, too much caffeine, and your amygdala's threshold for what counts as alarming drops. You become more flinchy, more reactive, snappier with people you love over things that on a calmer day wouldn't even register. That short fuse you get during a rough week, that's not a character flaw. That's a bouncer working a longer shift than usual, with less sleep, getting jumpier by the hour. The social flinch. Now here's a twist a lot of people don't expect. This circuit doesn't only fire for loud noises and fast objects. Researchers have found that the exact same defensive, protective startle pattern gets triggered by social threats too. Being criticized, being excluded, being embarrassed in front of other people. Work in social neuroscience, including research associated with Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA, has shown that social rejection activates overlapping regions to physical pain and threat processing, including structures tied into this same defensive circuitry. That's not just a poetic turn of phrase. Rejection hurts. Your nervous system is, to a real degree, treating a cutting comment from a coworker with some of the same alarm machinery it uses for a physical ambush, which is why a harsh text message can make your stomach drop and your shoulders tense exactly the way a loud bang does. Your body's not being dramatic. It's using the only defense system it's got, and that system doesn't have a separate setting for social danger. Please respond more calmly. This is also, by the way, a big part of why public speaking anxiety feels so disproportionate to the actual stakes. Standing in front of a room isn't life-threatening. Your amygdala didn't get that memo. As far as the bouncer's concerned, dozens of eyes locked onto you is close enough to a predator encounter to justify pulling the alarm. But here's the part that gets genuinely uncomfortable once you sit with it. We like to think of ourselves as rational creatures who experience the world, think about it, and then respond. That's the story we tell about our own minds. But the flinch is proof that a huge amount of what you do, how you react, who you snap at, what makes your stomach drop, what makes you recoil from a person or a conversation or a memory, is happening below the floor of your awareness, using machinery that's tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of years old, and that you have shockingly little direct control over. That gut feeling you get about a person within the first 2 seconds of meeting them, some of that is the low road, forming a threat assessment before your conscious mind has said a single word to itself about them. That flash of irritation you feel when your partner uses a certain tone of voice, the one that reminds you of an old argument or an old wound, that's your amygdala pattern matching a present moment sound to a past tense danger and hitting the alarm before your rational brain gets a vote. You're not always choosing your reactions. A huge number of them are being chosen for you in about the same 40 milliseconds it takes to blink at a bang by a part of your brain that has never once been interested in nuance, context, or being fair. And the deeply strange implication of that is this. A lot of the moments you feel most like yourself, the flash of anger, the sudden dread, the instant unease, are actually moments where you are the least in control of the machine and the most run by an ancient piece of software that's just trying to keep a much more fragile, much slower-moving primate alive. So think back to that pan hitting the kitchen floor. In the time it took you to flinch, your amygdala ran an entire threat assessment, activated a full-body defensive posture that's shared with every human being on the planet, and stood the whole operation down, all before the slower, smarter, more you part of your brain even had time to clock that a sound had occurred. You were, for a fraction of a second, not really the one driving, and maybe that's the strange comfort in it, or the strange discomfort depending on how you want to look at it. You're not weak for flinching. You're not overreacting when a harsh word lands like a slap, or when your shoulders climb up around your ears during a tense meeting, or when your heart pounds at a text notification that turns out to be nothing. You're just running very old software, doing exactly what it was built to do in a world it was never really designed for. So next time you catch yourself flinching before you even know why, it's worth asking. In that split second before you were back, before the thinking part of you caught up and took the wheel again, who exactly was in control?